Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the DUNU Talos. So here it is up close, and you've probably watched and read a dozen reviews on this one already, so we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about anything other than my impressions on it, but here it is up close. It is a nice looking set. It is a nice looking cable. It's a nice looking box, and it's got a graph here that we'll look at really quickly, and you already know exactly what I'm going to say here. And Talos, when you look at the graph, the only thing you can really glean from it is kind of the lower base set planar. So this is Timeless, which is kind of a classic base shelf. Timeless S12, the new KZ PR1 Pro. Lots of sets follow the same Timeless base shelf. It's a nice basey base shelf for planars, because planars can handle a little more bass, and it sounds great. It sounds great on all those sets. And then you get Talos, which is the lower version of that. So that is Talos. That is Solemn Notes Dioko. Maybe there's some other sets that take the lower bass shelf, but it is a leaner, meaner version of the bass on the planar, and the rest of it, you can't really glean too much of it. And I think this actually does roll off a little bit earlier than other sets, and I think they did that just to kind of get rid of that planar sheen to it. So, but that one's kind of maybe that's just my coupler, maybe not. So let's jump right into it, because there's a lot to cover here. So you've heard this lots and lots. It is the best tuned planar. Is it the best tuned planar? Does that actually matter? And my view of it is, it's the best tuned planar according to some people's preferences and priorities. So I will say, pick your priority. Is it a planar versus a planar trying to sound like a dynamic driver? And I think that's the style of this one. It's a kind of a more natural, they really went for a minimal planar timbre. So those who really are annoyed by that planar tizziness, that metallic, there's lots of things in some of the early planar sets that they tried to get rid of, and they successfully did that, but there is a cost to doing that. So yeah, I say it sounds like a dynamic driver, but that's just something to sound more natural as opposed to sounding specifically like a dynamic driver. Is it lacking that tactile bass that you find in other sets? I do think that leaner bass set is really lacking that planar bass that people buy. The S12, they're going to buy the KZ set, the Timeless. They all have that tactile bass. It actually kind of hits you right in the ear. And it is a really great feeling for those of you who have actually purchased a planar to hear that. And to have it lacking, for me, it just kind of feels like you're getting kind of half the set, but you're paying a lot of money for it. So does it beat Stellaris on detail? No, this one actually is not a planar that pushes detail. Again, they sort of went for this more natural, so it doesn't push detail. It doesn't really push the upper mids all that hard. This is more of an easier going set. Can it be used without EQ? And I think some of the earlier sets, some other planars, I think they all do sound a little better with EQ. Stellaris was one of them. And I think this one does actually work pretty well without EQ, so I'll give that one a yes. So what are the problems here? And again, like I said, the bass is just a bit light. It's genre limiting. And for those of you who don't care about mid bass, you'll probably not notice, but it really turns, and I said the same thing on Dioko, it turns rock music, rock tracks, things that require a little more mid bass into vocal rock with vocals floating over that missing mid bass. You sort of hear the sub bass, you hear the vocals, and there's that missing bit, the groove that's sort of missing in between the two. That's what the mid bass does. And on this set, it's really kind of barely there. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it peeks its head out, and you're like, oh, there's where the mid bass should be. It's just kind of a mixed bag on that level. And I would say the same thing about Dioko. It's just a really tough level to pull off on a planar that can really handle quite a bit more bass. So it does give you clarity, and I do think it does give you a little bit more sibilance. And I don't think this set is in particularly sibilant, but on the wrong track, on the wrong genre, where you get really, not enough low end to really kind of smooth out where the sibilants are, I think it's just clearer, I think is how I would call it. Those S's can be kind of super sharp because there's really nothing to cloud them up, to kind of layer over them, nothing to smooth them over. It's just clean, clear S's. And I think, so I wouldn't say that it's more sibilant, but I would say that you're going to notice the S's a little more because they're just clearer. So if you like the original Timeless and that unrefined but super detailed treble and details, this will sound a little more dampened, perhaps not as detailed or high resolution. Like I said, there's a cost to getting rid of that planar sheen, and a lot of it is that it doesn't really push detail as much as other planar sets do. And the stage, definitely not as big as I was expecting. It's okay, nothing really special for the price, right? This one is $200. I think that is a tough sell for what it delivers. It's okay. I don't know. People seem to like it. I think it's kind of okay. It definitely falls in that category of a set that will probably review well, that I would never pick up again. I think that's pretty accurate. Is it boring? Leading on from that last statement, is it a bit small? Yeah, I think this one, there's just a mix of things going on with that small stage that doesn't really have enough height, not enough separation because everything's a little smaller, that apparent reduced dynamics where they try to get rid of the planar timbre, and the instruments just don't really pop, and it sounds just a bit hair dampened. And a track like The Cure, Closer to Me, that closer mix, from the opening, it closes in rather than opening up. It's a really weird effect that you get on the Talos, and it happens quite often, enough that I sort of had to talk about it. Some tracks, fall in instead of opening up and big and open like you get on their planar, and some tracks just sound less engaging than others. And I do think that there is sort of this boringness and a smallness to the sound that doesn't exist on other planars, and I do notice it, and I think it's something to note when you're going to pay that much money for a planar set. So the sound, it's kind of neutral with that dampened treble. It's kind of going for that more natural than planar technicalities. Like I said, other sets really push that. Lots of air in the upper treble, lots of elevated treble. This one is not that one. This one is kind of more easygoing, more relaxed, and as I said, trying to really sound a little more natural. So the bass, like I said, kind of light for some genres. Planar tunings can handle a lot more bass, like you saw with Timeless. I think that level actually works really well, but in this smaller stage, it really couldn't have handled that much more bass. On busier tracks, the smaller stage, it was the right move to keep it clean, because if you had a smaller stage, more mid bass, you would have just ended up with a midsection that was just a little more cloudy, a little more congested than you would expect on a planar. So again, like I said, I think it probably was the right move considering the stage that they have to keep it a little cleaner. But, as far as working on some genres like rock, like the Smiths, stop me if you think you've heard this one before, the opening is actually pretty nice. And the tactile drums sort of peek their head out, and you can kind of get there. They're sort of almost there. You can almost hear that planar bass. But after 20 seconds, and the drums and the bass kind of falls back, the bass sort of pops in and out, like I said. It kind of reminds you that it's there, but then it disappears and it'll pop up again. It's just a hair light, and I do wish they had pushed it a little further. But then, again, like I said, I sort of understand for the sake of clarity, I think they did probably make the right move there. The mids are actually pretty good on less busy tracks, on those acoustic tracks where you hear the details. But even then, it really sounds a little less transparent and a little dynamic than other planars. It's kind of a weird dampened effect. A lot of that planar technicalities that you get from the edge and the very sharp transients and that speed, lots of things are sort of not as present as they are on some other planar sets. So yeah, it's kind of a weird effect. It sounds kind of good at first glance, and then after a while it gets a bit annoying, especially if you A-B it with another planar set. So a track like Diodo's Hurricanes, that live version, when at a minute 30, when those guitars come in and the whole thing should really open up, the guitars really don't pop. They don't have enough body because there's not enough mid bass, not really enough depth in the stage to really sound like other planars, and the whole thing really doesn't open up, as I said. They're good clean mids, but they would definitely be better with a bigger stage and a little more bass and body. So the treble, I think it's the most noticeable piece if you've heard other planars, and I say that if you've heard some of the original planars, like Timeless is actually a good example. Some people would call that maybe a little more metallic, a little more unrefined, a little more tizziness. There's sort of a fuzziness to it, and I think that's true. I think that this one, you sort of immediately get this more of a BA effect to it, where that the notes are actually cleaner and sharper, and I think they did that actually quite well. I think the treble is actually done quite well here, It's just pulled back in a little bit. So you really have that lack of thin, fuzzy planar sheen that you would get on some other sets. What is there is clean, but not really as extended as other planars. You don't have a lot of that air that you get on the other planars, and especially the ones that pushed a lot of air into the upper treble. Next level would have been more air and a sense of space, right? The stage is just a little smaller, but a little more upper treble, a little more air around the notes, a little more space. I think it would have really opened it up and really pushed the set to the next level. And I wouldn't call this one flat, but it's not really mid-fi hybrid level either. It's kind of okay. And those strings and Peter Alexander's No Better Time, they should really bite harder. Like I said, this whole bit of making it sound a little more natural really lost that biting edge on a planar, and it really should fill the space around your head by a minute 24, and this one kind of fills the inside of your head. It's very rare to have this one extend beyond your ears, and again, I don't want to harp on the stage, but at $200, it should have been a little better. So not bad, but it's not $200. So stage never quite gets big enough, and the lack of mid bass keeps it clear, and I think that was probably the right move for that stage size. And it's okay until you hear cheaper sets that extend well past your ears, right? Until you pick up another planar and you hear how big it should sound and how instruments should pop and the detail and resolution. So again, I think this one in isolation, it reviews well, sounds well. Probably not going to pick it up again, but that's what I got on Talos. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.